Tonight's speech is a living reminder that not everyone with a mic should have one. I'm Ethan Blake, and we've been graced with the verbal equivalent of a malfunctioning smoke detector. Loud, confusing, and completely missing the point. But never fear. I've got the fire extinguisher. We'll snuff out the spin, incinerate the contradictions, and turn every phony line into comedic fuel. It's not just satire, it's therapy for the reality deprived. Let's dive into the nonsense and emerge smarter, sharper, and a whole lot sassier.
Remember that debate during the pandemic? On the left, they were saying, Trump and Joe Rogan took it. It must be for animals. Okay, it won the Nobel Prize in 2015 for what it did for humans. But whatever, the point is, it's a drug. It's not a politician. Drugs don't have political parties. Although I do suspect Xanax is a Democrat. What good is liberalism if you don't win elections? Last week, Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton said, I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Yes, there's the problem in a nutshell. Because Congressman Moulton sounds reasonable to me, but his campaign manager immediately resigned in protest. Let me make this as plain as I can to the smart people. The campaign manager who resigned, yeah, let that person go.
At this point, it's only a matter of time before the Democratic Party slaps a "Do Not Invite" sticker across Bill Maher's forehead, because the man has been handing out verbal beatdowns hotter than a 4th of July grill. On the latest episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, the razor-sharp comedian didn't just criticize the Democrats, he flambéed them. With surgical precision, he called them out as a flock of spineless chickens, running in circles and clucking slogans with zero conviction and even less backbone. As always, we've got the full breakdown lined up for you. Every jab, every brutal truth, every scorched feather. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive in.
Americans must get over the fantasy they have that they are a people of core convictions and deeply held beliefs. They're not. They only care which side is saying something. Let me give you 10 million examples. This car used to be fire. Now it's on fire. Back when Elon Musk was presumed liberal, liberals loved electric cars and conservatives hated them. Then Elon went MAGA, and while the car market grew by 10% last month, sales of electric vehicles were down 5%, and not just Teslas, all EVs.
Right out of the gate, Maher came out swinging at liberals, and let's just say the punches landed hard. It wasn't just satire, it was a mirror held up to the face of progressive hypocrisy. I couldn't help but think of my neighbor, an unwavering Democrat, who once treated Elon Musk like the second coming of Einstein. A genius, he'd say. A visionary. Tesla is the future. Musk could do no wrong. Until, of course, he dared to veer from the Democratic script. Then, boom, overnight transformation. Suddenly, Musk wasn't a genius anymore. He was a traitor, a fraud, a tech overlord gone rogue. Maher called it exactly as it is. These people aren't guided by principle, truth, or facts. They're loyal only to the ideological tribe. Step out of line, even slightly, and you're no longer a thinker. You're the enemy. That's not progressivism. That's political cultism with a different flag.
This is a crazy, shallow way to make decisions that we all do too much. A new book by David Zweig called An Abundance of Caution about the repercussions from keeping the schools closed so long during the pandemic has garnered a lot of attention. And here's the author's takeaway line. The American Academy of Pediatrics were very strongly in favor of getting kids into schools, but as soon as Trump came out in favor of reopening, they completely reversed their position. Hey, if you find yourself suddenly hating something you loved 5 minutes ago, or vice versa, ask your doctor if ivermectin is right for you.
Trump derangement syndrome isn't just a phrase, it's a full-blown political pandemic. Picture this. An entire federal association reverses course on a key decision, not because of new facts, but simply because Trump's name is attached. That's not policy. That's sabotage disguised as principle. And the real kicker? The fury isn't even truly about Trump. It's about punishing the country to make a political point. When schools were shuttered or reopened based not on science or student welfare, but raw political spite, who paid the price? Not Trump. It was the children, the parents, the teachers. Lives disrupted, futures thrown into chaos just to score points against one man. This isn't resistance. It's revenge, and America's the collateral damage.
Remember that debate during the pandemic? On the left, they were saying, Trump and Joe Rogan took it. It must be for animals. Okay, it won the Nobel Prize in 2015 for what it did for humans. But whatever, the point is, it's a drug. It's not a politician. Drugs don't have political parties. Although I do suspect Xanax is a Democrat.
Oh, I remember it vividly. Rachel Maddow on MSNBC practically foaming at the mouth, launching into a melodramatic tirade about Joe Rogan taking horse dewormer. Not because he actually raided a veterinary cabinet, but because he dared question the mainstream COVID narrative, and worse, might lean Republican. That's the real sin in their book. For Democrats these days, it's not about truth or facts. It's about tribal allegiance. The second you step out of line or question the gospel, they brand you with the scarlet R faster than you can say nuance. You could be liberal, independent, or completely apolitical. It doesn't matter. If you're not parroting their script, you're suddenly cast as the villain. Cue the smug think pieces and snarky cable segments. It's no wonder Bill Maher compared them to Xanax. Because, let's face it, today's Democratic messaging could sedate a charging rhino. It's not energizing, it's numbing. Like the pill, they don't actually solve any of the root issues. They just mask the discomfort, dull the outrage, and help the public sleepwalk through a system that desperately needs a wake-up call. This isn't leadership. It's sedation disguised as progress.
Don't be a hypocrite. And that's the challenge, to not automatically rush to the opposite viewpoint based solely on who said it. But until we get to where we can do that, I just hope the Democrats come out strongly next week for dictatorship, coal mining, and making pot illegal.
Sure, no one's saying you have to pledge allegiance to the other side just because someone said something that made sense. But when the rhetoric coming out of your own party becomes a never-ending echo chamber of identity politics, self-righteous lecturing, and ideological word salad, maybe, just maybe, it's time to cross the aisle. Not because you suddenly love elephants more than donkeys, but because reality still matters to you. And that's exactly what more and more Democrats have done. They didn't switch sides. They escaped. They tuned in, heard the daily sermons from the Church of Woke, the relentless virtue signaling, the obsession with micro-labels, and said, I didn't sign up for this. So they moved. Some drifted to the center, others landed in the orbit of the right, because at least over there, people were still speaking full sentences without needing a decoder ring. And into that vacuum stepped Donald Trump, unfiltered, blunt, and unapologetically simple. Not everyone's hero, but to many, the only adult in a room full of activists playing dress-up. They weren't voting Republican, they were voting for a reality check, against the madness.
What good is liberalism if you don't win elections? Last week, Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton said, I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Yes, there's the problem in a nutshell. Because Congressman Moulton sounds reasonable to me, but his campaign manager immediately resigned in protest. Let me make this as plain as I can to the smart people. The campaign manager who resigned, yeah, let that person go.
And that, folks, is exactly how the Democrats managed to fumble an election they should have dominated. They didn't just lose touch with working Americans, they ditched them in favor of academic lectures, fringe activism, and Twitter approval. While families were worrying about skyrocketing grocery bills, unsafe neighborhoods, failing schools, and chaos at the border, Democratic leaders were busy renaming buildings and lecturing people on pronouns. It wasn't just tone deaf, it was political malpractice on a national scale. Voters noticed, and they didn't just flinch, they revolted. Even relatively moderate Democrats like Representative Seth Moulton, who dared suggest maybe, just maybe, the party should care about practical issues, were immediately targeted. The party didn't debate them. It punished them. Some were shut down, others canceled, some outright erased by the very side they called home. Not by Republicans, but by their own so-called allies. This is what happens when a party that once prided itself on intellectual freedom becomes an ideological cult. You don't lose the argument, you lose the country. And don't act surprised when those you silenced come back to vote against you, loudly. Because they didn't abandon the party. The party abandoned them.
Try making too woke be a cancelable offense. It's important for America to have a center-left party, and for that party to be competitive. And a good first step toward that goal would be to make the voters not want to punch you in the face.
Of course, we need some version of sanity to return to the left if it ever wants to be politically relevant, let alone remotely appealing, again. But let's not kid ourselves. The so-called center-left isn't some magical fix. After all, it was progressivism that birthed the very wokeness now suffocating the movement. So slapping a moderate sticker on it doesn't erase the rot underneath. It just puts a fresh coat of paint on the same collapsing structure. Sure, the center-left may sound less hysterical. They may swap hashtags for half-measured policy proposals, but if they're still clinging to the same ideological DNA, the obsession with identity politics, the moral superiority complex, the never-ending purity tests, then what exactly is new? If anything, it's just a quieter kind of crazy. That said, even a cosmetic shift toward the center could serve one critical purpose: flushing out the worst of the extremism. If we could at least ditch the delusional dogma that labels every opposing thought as hate speech and treats common sense like it's a hate crime, we might finally make room for real conversations, honest debate, practical solutions, anything that isn't just another sermon from the Church of Woke.
I will conclude by saying the reason I'm so mad at the Democrats is because as a voter, the issues that were important to me were democracy and the environment. And now, there's no one to champion or defend either of them because you, with your aggressively anti-common sense agenda and shitty exclusionary attitude, blew it. You lost everything: House, Senate, White House, Supreme Court, and left us completely unprotected and ready to be violated.
Bill Maher has finally ripped the mask off, exposing a deep and growing frustration with the Democratic Party, a party he didn't just support with applause, but with cold, hard cash. For years, Maher poured money into the DNC, believing he was backing a movement rooted in classic liberalism: democracy, free speech, environmental stewardship, and sane governance. But somewhere along the way, the Democrats swapped substance for spectacle. Instead of defending free inquiry or crafting rational policies, the party transformed into a performative circus, more concerned with Twitter clout and TikTok trends than real-world impact. Maher isn't the only one noticing. Lifelong Democrats are quietly fuming, not at liberalism itself, but at what's become of it. They signed up to combat climate change, defend civil liberties, and promote reason, not to get sucked into hashtag activism, linguistic gymnastics, and ideological purity tests. Now they're leaving, not out of rage, but out of principle. They're not MAGA converts. They're refugees from a party that lost the plot. The values they believed in haven't changed. The party did, and Maher, as always, just said the quiet part out loud.
You can get creative with a novel, a TV show, or a movie, but history books, that's not supposed to be fan fiction. How we teach our kids history has become a big controversy these days, with liberals accusing conservatives of wanting to whitewash the past, and sometimes that's true, sometimes they do. But plenty of liberals also want to abuse history to control the present. And last month, a scholar named James Sweet caught hell for calling them out for doing just that. He criticized a phenomenon known as presentism, which means judging everyone in the past by the standards of the present. It's the belief that people who lived 100 or 500 or 1,000 years ago really should have known better.
The Democratic Party isn't just walking away from democratic principles. They're actively waging war on the very foundation of national identity. history itself. And no, this isn't about correcting errors or expanding inclusion. This is about a full-blown ideological cleansing where the past is judged through the lens of today's hyper-fragile, hyper-politicized standards. Take Abraham Lincoln, the man who literally signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Even he hasn't escaped the crosshairs of woke revisionism. Suddenly, he's not the great emancipator. He's another problematic relic to be dissected and discarded for not meeting the purity tests of 2025. This isn't progress. It's performance. It's history being hijacked by activists who care more about virtue signaling than historical context. Instead of seeing historical figures as products of their time, flawed, yes, but pivotal, they demand modern-day moral perfection from 19th century leaders. The result? A generation disconnected from its roots, deprived of the lessons learned through struggle and imperfection. Erasing history doesn't elevate us. It amputates the very foundation of wisdom we claim to be fighting for.
Which is so stupid. It's like getting mad at yourself for not knowing what you know now when you were 10. Stupid me, spending all that time raising sea monkeys and playing with slot cards and jerking off to a Playboy in the barn. Who doesn't have moments from your past that make you cringe? Who hasn't said, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I wore that. I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe I did that. You ate dirt. You wanted to be a Ghostbuster. You shoplifted gum. You tried to be a white breakdancer.
Let's get one thing straight. No one is perfect. Not even the saints of history. Thomas Jefferson penned the Declaration of Independence, preaching liberty while owning slaves. Mahatma Gandhi led a nonviolent revolution, but held regressive views on race and gender. Winston Churchill helped defeat the Nazis, but also defended brutal colonialism. These contradictions don't disappear with time, but they also don't erase the impact these figures made. Here's the hard truth. Historical legacies are complex. You don't judge a person by one tweet or one flaw. You judge them by the totality of what they did for humanity. The freedoms they helped build, the institutions they shaped, the courage they showed when it counted. That's nuance. That's intellectual honesty. But nuance is a dirty word now, isn't it? Today's outrage machine demands moral perfection in hindsight, grading historical titans on a modern purity test while ignoring their broader impact. And when you do that, you don't grow, you erase. Which brings us to the Democrats. They didn't lose ground because Trump outsmarted them. They lost because they traded backbone for hashtags. They became the party of performance over principle. And yes, Bill Maher is calling it out because someone finally has to. He's not betraying the left, he's dragging it back to reality. When facts get bulldozed by feelings and policy becomes theater, people stop voting, not because they're MAGA, but because they're exhausted. Tired of being told their questions are problematic. Tired of leaders who chase TikTok trends instead of fixing the economy. This country doesn't need another scolding. It needs adults in the room. It needs truth. And that curtain, it's coming down fast. If you're done with the circus and ready for clarity, hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll keep unpacking the mess. See you in the next one. Next.